All right, folks, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. In today's presentation, we're going through When Did Jews Arrive in Scotland, Part 1. Disclaimer. So, as always, disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. And once again, we're going through When Scotland Was Jewish by Elizabeth Caldwell Hirschman and Donald N. Yates. Cornwall. So the Phoenicians traded with the rich tin miners in Cornwall since ancient times, who had established trade with ports in places such as France, North Africa, Italy, and Greece. The Jews worked and traded with the Phoenicians extensively, which is reflected in Cornwall's genetics, showing a great deal of J and E3 results. Danmoni, so the Cornwall and Devon area in ancient times was known as Danmoni, possibly meaning Dan's tin mines. This could possibly be connected to the Irish myth of the Tuatha De Danann. The book speculates there is also evidence of Hebrew colonies in Britain going way back, and Ireland was once known as Iberion, possibly derived from Eber or Heber. Jews in Scotland. There is no official record of Jews in Scotland prior to 1290. There were few Jews in Scotland prior to the formation of Jewish communities in cities such as Edinburgh and Glasgow before the 19th century, at least according to official history. The book picks up the trail with the Jews who came across with the Normans first in the late 11th century. William the Conqueror. So the first mention of Jews in England was in the late 7th century. There were Jews, though probably not very many, in England going very far back. But with William the Conqueror, there came a huge influx, and they were granted many privileges under the Norman Plantagenets, who, as we've covered before, believed themselves to be Davidic Jews. The Jews in England. So the Jews in England conducted a lot of international trade, banking, and were engaged in the medical profession. We've seen that before with the Judaic colony in Aberdeen presentation. Although they were very prosperous, they were very much subject to the protection of the monarch, and attacks on them began within 2 centuries. King Richard I. This means Richard the Lionheart, by the way. I don't know why they didn't just say that, but anyway. So when King Richard I was crowned in the late 12th century, there was a riot outside Westminster Abbey. The Christian population beat up and killed a lot of them, and the new king did his best to protect his Jewish subjects. But the violence lasted over a day, and they were massacred, except a handful who were baptized. Following this atrocity, King Richard issued an edict which promised to punish anyone who harmed the Jews. Under King Henry III. So, in many towns throughout England, entire communities of Jews converted to Christianity, becoming crypto Jews. Things didn't get any better during the 13th century, and during King John's reign, they were repeatedly extorted. Doesn't come as a surprise to me. Under King Henry III, the pressure on the Jews became so intense that they twice requested to leave England altogether. Robbed and massacred. So, in the early 13th century, the Jews were made to wear a distinguishing badge, and the Archbishop of Canterbury forbade Jews to own Christian slaves. King Henry III forbade all sexual intercourse between Jews and Christians, and they were no longer allowed to practice medicine. During his reign, the Jews were repeatedly robbed and massacred, and they were disqualified from owning land or property except what was already in their possession.
It sounds like Nazi Germany to me.
When Prince Edward became king. So when Prince Edward became king, that's King Edward I Longshanks, he expelled all Jews who refused to convert to Christianity. According to the book, 16,000 Jews left England and were allowed to take their possessions with them. these Jews came to Scotland, though they practiced their faith in secret, outwardly acting as Christians. By the way, I made a video about this. I think it was like 2 years ago or something like that, from the book William Wallace, Robin Hood Revealed. So I'll put that in the description. Check that out. Under Oliver Cromwell, so the Jews officially returned to England in the mid-17th century under Oliver Cromwell, and between the 13th and 17th centuries, there were still pockets of Jews operating in England as philosophers, physicians, some still quite openly, according to the book. Spanish and Eastern Jews found refuge in England, and under Queen Elizabeth I, one of her physicians was Jewish. Crypto-Judaism. So after the mass expulsion of Sephardic Jews from Spain and Portugal, a large wave of them came to Scotland, and the Caldwells are a good example of this. We've seen that before in previous presentations. The book now shifts focus on to the psychological and sociological influence of Crypto-Judaism. Those who remained in England after the 1290 expulsion presented themselves as Roman Catholics until the advent of Anglicanism under King Henry VIII in order to maintain their facade. The Iberian Sephardic Jews arriving in England after the Inquisition in 1492 continued to remain outwardly Roman Catholic, as this was the state religion of Spain and Portugal. And if I'm not mistaken, it still is. So there we go. That's the end of part 1. As always, feel free to leave your thoughts and comments down below.